Welcome. We are doing now the introduction to lesson 12, the Renaissance, and we are going to focus on a few features of the Renaissance, the ones that may be the most confusing in the book. This is one of the most beautiful of all the lessons, because we are going to analyze the artistic output of the Renaissance. So again, this is the Renaissance with capital R, and this is not only considered a very important period in the history of Western civilization, but it's also one of the most beautiful ones, and it is seen by historians as the beginning of modernity, the beginning of the modern world. And because of that, I'm going to begin the lesson, the introduction to the lesson, by mentioning the three features of the Renaissance that make the Renaissance the beginning of the modern world. So these features of the Renaissance are still with us, and I don't imagine they will not be with us in the future, because they have become part of who we are, especially who we are in the United States. All across Western civilization, we could say that these features are important, but it seems that here in the United States, we stress those features more than any other society. So we are going to start then with those three features. One of them, and I'm not going to explain them to you, I'm going to just let you think about them. One of them is called individualism, and as I mentioned before, I'm strongly convinced that we are the most individualistic society, that we focus on competition, that we focus on our uniqueness, and we do not want anybody to take that away from us. And we do that, we stress individualism not only on adults, but we do that as soon as our children are born. We want them to feel good about themselves. We want them to feel that they are the best. We want them to know that we are proud of them. My child is an honor student. And of course, we have all kinds of bumper stickers that say, yes, your child may be an honor student, but my child is going to be yours. But we stress all the time how wonderful we are. And this is a feature that started in the Renaissance and is called individualism. Then now, let me mention something. These features are characteristics of the Renaissance. That doesn't mean that before the Renaissance there were not people who felt the desire to succeed, the desire to be considered the greatest. But as a society, in the Middle Ages, individualism was not something important. And in fact, if you think about the spirit of the Middle Ages, the spirit of Christianity is exactly the opposite. The spirit of Christianity is to be humble, not to brag about who you are, not to brag about yourself. So the Renaissance broke with the rule of humility to bring the opposite, to bring how wonderful I am. I want you to know that I am wonderful. And that is what individualism is all about. The next characteristic of or hallmark of the Renaissance is the beginning of the interest in and focus on material things, and that is called secularism. Now, some people would say secularism is the opposite of the Christian spirit, and it may be true, but we manage in our society, we manage to be very secular, perhaps the most secular society in the world, and at the same time we claim to be deeply religious. So, because again, the spirit of Christianity, the spirit of the Middle Ages, is the opposite of materialism. But we are so immersed in the spirit of the Renaissance, that is secularism, that we are constantly trying to focus on material things, focus on this world other than the afterworlds. And if you think of what are your real interests, you will say that, in all honesty, what I want is to make money. In fact, the term making money was a term that was born during the Renaissance. And we want to have the best of everything. We want to have the best iPhone, the best iPad, the best of the best of the best. We measure success by how much money we make. And that is, again, the result of the new spirit of the Renaissance, secularism. And the last of the features of the Renaissance is the way we pay attention to intellectual activities, or to education, and to learning, to learning for the sake of learning. Now, most people are not that interested in humanism because they are more interested in making money, succeeding. And so secularism and individualism in our society, I guess, have first and second place. And humanism is still something that we value. We value education, we value intellectual work, but we really value it more for what they are going to give us. So if we value, and you think about what you do and the reason why you are in school, it may not be because you just love to learn. It may be because by getting another degree, you are going to be able to have a better position in society. And by better position, I mean social or economic position. So, but humanism is the third feature of the Renaissance. So as you read your book, you are going to see that humanism is everywhere in the Renaissance. In fact, during the Renaissance, people became interested in reading. And the reason is because during the Renaissance, one person, his name is Gutenberg, decided that society, people needed more books. And the only way to do that was improving the printing press. That doesn't mean inventing the printing press, but inventing a new type of printing press with which more books would be produced, and therefore more people would have the opportunity of enriching their minds with books. So the printing press comes together with the new interest in humanism. Some other aspect of the Renaissance, and maybe as we understand what the people in the Renaissance thought of history, we will understand why we are studying history the way we do. Because during the Renaissance, people started focusing more on political, social, economic aspects of society. The focus was no longer one person, one king or one queen. The focus was not only military history, the focus was the study of society as a whole. And it was during the Renaissance that those people who lived in the 15th and 16th century decided that the period before them had been a very dark period, and that period before them was not even worth mentioning, because the only interest that they had was the classics, the Greeks and the Romans. So they divided history into periods, and the period that was not important is the period that became known as the Middle Ages. Just in the middle, nothing important. What is important is the Greco-Roman period, and then the period that they were living, because they felt that they were living an important moment in history, which was the Renaissance of culture. So that is how the Renaissance changed the concept of history. And remember, the Greeks had done that, but the people in the Middle Ages had forgotten. So the people in the Renaissance brought back the ideas of the Greeks, such as history is the story of actions by individuals, and they did not want to include any supernatural activity in the study of history, which is what we have done. So, once we study all these different aspects of the Renaissance, the last part of the lesson is to deal with the artistic output of the Renaissance, the art and the artists. And in the Renaissance, the art focused on different topics, different subjects, and the artists had also a different status. And this is what we are going to be looking at during the last part of this lesson. And so we are going to start with what is called the early Renaissance, the Renaissance in Italy in the 15th century, and then we will focus on the late Renaissance. So during the early Renaissance, we are going to focus on, especially on two amazing artists. One of them is Botticelli. You have in your book a narrative of who Botticelli was, and I believe in the book you'll see the one of the two great paintings. One is the Birth of Venus, and the other one is Primavera, or Spring. So here you see one of them, and I think the book has the other one. Botticelli lived in the early Renaissance in Italy, in Florence, in the 15th century, together with Donatello. And Donatello, you may be too young to remember the Ninja Turtles, but Donatello is one of them. And Donatello is very, very important, because one of the features of the Renaissance art is the attention to the human body. During 1,000 years almost, the Christian church had not accepted the representation of the human body. So now the artists in the Renaissance are paying all their attention to the beauty of the human body, just like the Greeks and the Romans did. So Donatello is the first one who made a totally nude bronze statue that you can see all around, and that was considered a very, very daring action. In fact, Lorenzo de Medici, who owned the David, had it hidden. He would only show it to his best friends, because it was seen as something that was not accepted by the church. So Botticelli and Donatello then are the two artists that we will focus on during the early Renaissance, and then the rest of the lesson will be spent on the big three of the high Renaissance or the late Renaissance, and those are our three other Ninja Turtles, if you remember them: Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci. Both Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci, both Michelangelo and Raphael were very famous, and they worked in Florence for a while and then in Rome. But Leonardo da Vinci was not that successful as an artist because he had a very interesting personality. He was interested in everything, but he seldom finished his projects. So he ended up looking for jobs everywhere, and then eventually he went to live in France for the King of France and died there. We are going to analyze also the most amazing, famous failure by Leonardo da Vinci. And one of the reasons why this is so famous is because it has every feature of the Renaissance. Among them, what is called the perspective, the linear perspective. If you see, all the lines go to a central point. And this is one of the new features of the Renaissance, the discovery of this depth in the paintings. And then once we focus on the artists, the last topic perhaps of this lesson is going to be what was the role of the popes during the Renaissance. And the reason why it's important to analyze this is because the role and the attitude of the popes of the Renaissance papacy is in many ways a cause of our next lesson, which is the Protestant Reformation. So what attitude did the popes have? Well, in a nutshell, we could say that the popes were totally immersed in the spirit of the Renaissance. They were individualistic, they were great humanists, and they really wanted money. They were focusing on material things, on this world, and in some ways they forgot their purpose. That their purpose was to be religious leaders and to minister to the people. So as an example, we have, this is perhaps one of the most famous works of art. This is an unfinished work by Michelangelo, and it's supposed to be the tomb of one pope. So the tomb of Julius II. And he commissioned Michelangelo to do all this. And Michelangelo spent a great deal of his life working for just the tomb of a pope. And that shows you the spirit, the individualism of the pope, and the humanism of the pope, because he wanted, if you can see, he wanted to have Greco-Roman style in his tomb. Another example is this one. This is a statue of Bacchus, and Bacchus is the god of wine. So what we see is a very, very drunk Bacchus. He can barely hold his wine goblet. And this was commissioned by, not the Pope, but by a cardinal, because all the church leaders were involved in the Renaissance. This was also made by Michelangelo. And when Michelangelo finished this work, the cardinal didn't like it. The cardinal thought it was insulting to have a drunken Bacchus there. but Michelangelo was just having fun with it. And so, but the reason why this is significant is because the Renaissance, as wonderful an artistic and cultural movement as it was contemporary to the topic of our next lesson, the Protestant Reformation. And in many ways the Protestant Reformation happened because the Renaissance papacy was not fulfilling its duties, and it had become too immersed in the spirit of the Renaissance. And with this, we almost finished the lesson, because there is, as part of the humanist movement, there is a subgroup that is called the Northern Christian Humanism. And this Northern Christian Humanism is called Northern because it developed in the northern part of Europe. It's called Christian because it focused on Christian aspects. And this Northern Christian Humanism is one of the elements, or one of the causes of the Protestant Reformation also. And one of the most important Christian humanists is Thomas More, that wrote a very important book, Utopia, and we talk about him now, and we will also talk about him later when we discuss the Reformation in England. So this topic, the Northern Christian Humanism, is a topic for this lesson, and then it will be also the introduction to next lesson.